It must have been like at least 12 or 13 years ago. We were sitting in a cafe and we're thinking about the idea and the opportunity to get bands to play in front of a bigger audience without having to pay tons of money to a bigger band just in order to get them out. And that's how we started brainstorming on the tour. Like, how can we create an event where people just come out for the sake of the event and give bands a bigger exposure, you know? Pretty much 10 years ago, I think it was October 2006, there was the first Never Say Die tour. 6 bands combined. It was Comeback Kid, Parkway Drive, Cancer Bats. I think the Warriors were also on the tour. Yeah, that's how we did it. The concept turned out the way we wanted to. Like, I mean, the tour had better turnouts than all these bands' headliners. And until this day, like, the tour is doing a lot better than any headline tour would have done, you know. So we created an event, like a touring circus, like a great brand that people are interested in, you know. Yeah, so far so good. I mean, 2016 was a 10-year anniversary and it was a really strong tour actually. I mean, it did a lot better than a lot of people thought it would do because it was a real heavy tour, just like straight up death metal, deathcore, metalcore bands. And all the German shows, there were over 1,000 people. Leipzig had 1,500 people. London was sold out with 1,200 people. Manchester was sold out, and yeah. I mean, in the beginning, the first Never Say Die tour didn't have a sponsor. The second tour had a sponsor. It was Altamont, like a skateboard, snowboard company. And I think from the third year on, it was always IMPERICON, you know. They're the sponsor of the tour. We work very close with them. I mean, obviously a lot of the bands we have on the tour, they have a close relationship with, as they are the merchandise company in Europe. And I mean, they also have a real good grasp of, like, you know, what's cool and how you can push bands to a certain level. And they're the sponsor, but also they help pushing the brand and help pushing the tour, you know. They're also really good with promotion. The Never Say Die brand in general, I think, is really strong. From the logo to the overall design every year, I think that's also a selling factor, you know. I mean, it's if you look at it and you think that must be something really cool. Let's check out this show, you know. The biggest challenge of Never Say Die is really to come up with a good lineup, you know, and convince certain bands that the tour is good for them. I mean, it doesn't really take a lot of convincing, you know, but also it's the aspect, like, who matches with whom, you know. I mean, you cannot really take like a very mellow sounding band and like put them together with a brutal death metal or deathcore band, you know. That doesn't feel right. So the overall vibe on Never Say Die is always really important. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a lot of bands, it's a lot of gear, it's a lot of people, but I mean, the bands are usually younger and they enjoy part of being a bigger touring circus, and yeah. The majority of the shows are taking place in Germany, in the UK. You have like 2 Benelux shows, you have like 2 or 3 France shows. We do like 2 shows in Spain. There's like 1 or 2 Eastern European shows. Sometimes there's also a Scandinavian show, but Scandinavia is really hard. But I think the first Never Say Die tour really did probably 600 people average across the board, across the different territories, countries, and it's also lineup specific. I mean, Parkway Drive, I think they used to headline Never Say Die 3 times. And obviously when they headlined it, I mean, it was in the beginning when they really started to explode and become like a huge band. And I mean, these shows all did in between like 1,500 and 2,500 people, which is obviously like the biggest Never Say Die ever done. I mean, what's always good with Never Say Die is, like, obviously you play in front of a lot more people than you would on your regular tours, and that obviously helps with the morale and with like the exposure, and I mean, that makes the bands happy, you know, to play in front of a bigger crowd, and most of these bands are really well received. And I think no matter if, like, you know, touring can be hard and tiring from time to time, and even if people are sick, and I mean, if you play a good show at the end of the night, that's what these bands live for, you know. I mean, that's what they're striving for, and I think that's probably one of the main reasons why morale is so high. So we started in 1996, and but before that we were involved like with fanzines, and we did a record label, and we were involved with promoting shows locally. Like, I mean, really small stuff. I mean, the clubs were a lot smaller. It was a lot more like DIY orientated, and And through the fanzine and through also the label side of things, I mean, bands started to hit us up and ask, hey, can you help out with arranging a handful of shows? And those tours had maybe 50 to 150 people average turnout-wise. And we did it for the fun aspect of it, you know. I mean, we didn't really have a plan back then, you know. I mean, and we didn't use nightliners. There weren't proper van rental companies. There weren't proper backline companies. So it's more like we had our ear on the ground. We knew who could help with a van, who could like help arrange a backline. And then there was the internet. I mean, we booked tours by calling people and actually sending faxes, you know. And it started to grow over the years. I mean, we booked like 1 or 2 tours per year. And I mean, it grew to the point where we book 70 to 100 European tours per year, you know. And it constantly got bigger and bigger. I mean, it got so big to a point where we had to decide, is this a hobby still, or are we going to make this our full-time job? I mean, we can't do both, you know. We can't work in a graphic design company and do this at the same time. And probably 10 years ago, we decided to do this full-time. That's how we built Avocado, really, you know. I mean, the difference from back then to now is, back then when everything was a lot more DIY orientated, like the scene was a lot smaller. I mean, you felt a lot more passionate about certain things, you know. It was a lot harder to even find music, you know. I mean, who distributes it? Like, who are these bands? How do they look like? How can I find a concert? I mean, do they even tour Europe? Do they even tour my city? I mean, it was like a very interesting, adventurous process, even like being involved in that type of music. And these days, with like everything going digital, with the internet, with Spotify, with certain like, you know, easy accessible platforms, and with bands touring Europe constantly, you know, there are certain bands who tour Europe 3-4 times a year. And I mean, everything is a lot more consumable. It's easier. I mean, it's so easy accessible that to a certain degree it loses the excitement, the thrill aspect of it to a certain extent. And our main goal, and that probably goes for every band, and I mean that's probably what every band's goal is like to create music, to create art that has longevity and that is permanent and not just like a fade or a trend or like something plastic, you know, that's cool for a day and then not cool the next day, you know. The interesting part, and I mean that's still around, I mean that hasn't changed over the last 20 years. And when I hear something and it tickles my stomach and I feel the music, it's the same feeling I had back then. So I mean, music still transports emotion, ideas, like an overall feeling. And I mean, if you're open to that, you understand. I mean, obviously people have different opinion, but from my point of view, I understand when a band is really good and does something for me, and when I feel there's a deeper meaning there, you know. And no matter if it's emotionally or like intellectual or politically or whatever. And that's what we're all looking for, is like bands with substance, bands that have like a long-term plan, you know. Also with Never Say Die, you want to create something that is a little more valuable than the average tour out there, you know. And you want to create like something that people really want to be part of, and that the bands can be proud of, and the promoters are interested to be involved in. And by doing that, I'm 100% convinced we create something that kids, people, fans are interested in seeing. That's the reason why they come out to a show. And if you package well, if you understand where bands are coming from, if you understand how bands work, if you know how to help putting together chemistry, it turns out and it translates into turnouts. And translating into turnouts means people are stoked going to a show. They want to have a good time. They want to lose themselves, you know. They don't want to be confronted with their daily life. They want to look for a place where they can just be themselves, be different, you know. Find an alternative still to, you know, even if it's just like having a good time for 2 or 3 hours, you know. These are all good reasons to go to a show. And yeah, it was a real good tour.